Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Death and destruction of Earth only a week away. Pam Zerba will be reviewing and promoting Atheists in America, a brand new book that tells all and exposes all. Stay tuned for this and a lot more on the Free Thought Forum. Take it, Jay. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Free Thought Forum, brought to you by the friendly folks at Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. I'd like to introduce my co-host tonight, Jacob Zentichko. I blew his name. Jacob. Also, our guest tonight, Pam Zerba, who will be reviewing the book Atheists in America, of which she wrote a chapter. So, stay tuned. What we were saying earlier about death and destruction of Earth only a week away. Well, you know, it's not unusual to read almost on a daily basis about the coming destruction of Earth and all its sinning inhabitants, usually spouted by questionable clergy and quoted from passages in most scripture, especially if you peruse passages from Ezekiel, Daniel, Revelation, to name a few. Nation will rise up against nation, instigated by man's feudal nature and fueled by God and the devil, until the face of the planet will be a burned out cinder. You know, this sounds very much like worldwide nuclear war to me. However, I find it doubtful that any powerful, intelligent nation would be stupid enough to participate in a mutually assured destruction by dropping the first nuke. However, with the worldwide proliferation of nuclear weapons, it's not too unreasonable to expect that some smaller country, powermonger or terrorist group like, well, ISIS, could obtain parts to make a dirty nuclear bomb, or even purchase a whole megaton device on the black market. And then what would probably happen next? Boom! Then unbridled finger pointing and manufactured evidence. Proof that a particular faction was to blame, followed by retaliatory strikes. Are you scared? Worried, when you hear about all local wars and unrest in the Middle East and Russia? What about the unrest in our own country? Recent riots in the streets, gun violence, drive-by shootings? And Armageddon is very close, so they say. By the way, let's not rule out radical evangelical Christians that would just love to start another world war, thinking that Jesus would return sooner. Do they really believe that a fictional character is going to save them and the world that they willingly destroyed? However, what if a nuclear war or even Ebola was the least of your worries? What if nations rising up against nations paled in comparison to our most probable future end? Look up in the sky. You definitely will not see God, Jesus, or even Superman, now or ever. What you may see is a tiny speck of light that seems to get brighter and brighter every evening. Or what you might visit Yellowstone National Park and see all the park rangers kind of scratching their heads because Old Faithful is not so faithful anymore. Or what if you just went to the beach to catch a few rays, just relax, drink a beer, and talk to your boss on the cell phone and go, excuse me, I'm too sick to come into work today. Life is good. What you don't know is that you could have possibly died a relatively short while ago, and almost every power grid in the country fried. All cell phones and satellites burned out, and every piece of energized electronics would be smoke. As you lay on the beach, you look up and you see the aurora borealis. This is not the north, but it's covering most of the sky, shimmering in the daytime. And it's not the Holy Ghost you see. Are all these dangers secret weapons by the Chinese or Russians? Yeah, nothing that sinister. The light in the sky may be a comet or asteroid headed our way. As for the changes at Yellowstone National Park, remember, it is one of the largest volcanoes in the world, and if it should erupt, it would be an extinction event. Well, what was I saying earlier about that nice day at the beach? No, you won't die then, but it's much worse than that for the world, old Mother Earth. Good old Sol just put a warning shot right across our bow. One of the most feared events in our solar system, one that we cannot stop at this time or predict with any degree of certainty, one that moves so quickly that Earth could only have a few or more hours warning before it hits us. A coronal mass ejection. Yeah, it's not that what you think. A CME. For those evangelicals out there, remember, okay, it was your God that supposedly created all of these destructive things along with the world. We're not talking about simple sunspots, but a piece of the sun's outer skin, corona, plasma, actually flying off like a piece of molten lead, so fast and powerful that it can escape the sun's gravity, and having that strength and speed can reach any place in our solar system and beyond. Now, we have been experiencing these CMEs for millions of years, but most were not heading in our direction like that. A CME, a solar phenomenon that can send billions of tons of solar particles, that's electrically charged gas particles, plasma, into space, and can reach Earth in about 1 to 3 days later, depending upon their speed, and they do vary. Oh, relax. I was just exaggerating about that instant death part to get your attention. Man would not even know that a massive CME hit us, except for the fact that all our electronics technology would cease to work, and we would be back in the Stone Age until we could repair the damage. That would take many years. No phones, no cars, no lights, and worst of all, no television or internet, and no WRCT Channel 16 in York, PA. Oh, woe is me. However, astronomers and scientists will see the light of the CME before it hits us. Now, at its closest point, light from the sun's surface takes an average of, 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach the Earth. CME speed can vary from only 124 miles per second to 621 miles a second, with an average of about 264. That's over 2 million miles an hour. full speed, we would have less than 42 hours. Excuse me. Take a drink of water. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Before the recent leap, giant leap in worldwide technology, there had not been much on the face of the earth or above us that could be affected by a giant CME. Things are much different now. Since there is no God or Jesus that is going to save you or us, we have to save ourselves. Doggone it. Only science has a chance of doing that. And because there are not enough son of a gun, scientists in the world, and because of the Dark Ages, science is over 500 years behind its time in knowing what we should have known by now. On July 23rd, 2012, a gigantic coronal mass ejection erupted from our sun and was heading in our direction. And you probably didn't even know about it. If it had hit the Earth, the damage would have been in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. Electric power to all our cities and towns would have ceased nationwide, and nearly all line transformers would have been fused to a crisp. Okay, maybe I misled you at first with the hot lead comment. Kind of. That would not be the case. But by the time a CME reached Earth, it would be an unbelievably intense electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, ionized radiation, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays in a form of a fog. Also thrown out are solar protons. And these are the first particles that reach Earth and play havoc with our atmosphere and our magnetic field. You would not even feel the electromagnetic pulse unless you have a pacemaker. Then, boom, goodbye. But every wire in the world would. Some of the EMP would be absorbed or deflected by our magnetic field and atmosphere. Most would not. No amount of prayer will help. And no significant changes to our atmosphere are possible. Sorry, no significant changes to our atmosphere are more. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, God, I shouldn't have taken that cotton pick and drink. Anyway, Jim, get ready in the studio. The following video can be viewed full length from science.nasa.gov and will give you the complete story and a little bit better in, I think, Jim, roll the, there we go. Now, now this is an actual, forget about this, that workshop already passed. This is actual video taken by two of our satellites called Stereo and some ground observatories which monitor the sun on a constant basis. Okay, this is the actual sort of like double CME. There's the first part of the thing, and here comes, boom, the second part of the thing. Okay, now, if you look at the surface of the sun, it appears to be alive. An angry sea constantly churning and changing its appearance. Now, this is not sci-fi. This is real. with very special eye protection, you can observe solar flares erupting from the sun using a pair of binoculars by a pair of binoculars. Warning, do not look directly at the sun without wearing eye protection, like a welding mask or brazing goggles. Sunglasses will not protect your eyes, and you could be blinded. Now, the CMEs have hit the Earth back before technology. Now, with all the technology that you see there on the screen, this is most susceptible to these electromagnetic pulses. And you can see all the infrastructure there on the screen that it affects. So if you lose worldwide communication and everything else and power, you're really going to suffer. That was a picture you just saw of a blown out transformer. Are you still worried about Jesus, the Antichrist, and 1,000 years of war in the end times, and hell for all eternity? Don't worry. I slightly fear comets, asteroid strikes, global warming, volcanoes, maybe Christians, and CMEs far more than any deity duo. My fears are not based on clergy trying to rule the world by preaching lies. I lose only about 1 minute of sleep every 2 years worrying about CMEs too. I lose more than that worrying about religious extremists. Now, all these non-godly things are on our doorstep right now, or at least walking up our driveway, and we will certainly not have time to slam the door in catastrophe's face unless we act now and place more emphasis on science and research. Science is our savior, not some invisible man in the sky. With armies of scientists, doctors, physicists, we can cure disease. We can find ways to protect ourselves from the aforementioned catastrophic possibilities and learn about the universe and life itself. Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the screen. It seemed to go up there for a second. The science of psychopathology, which includes all the psychiatry, psychology, and everything else, and all of mental health, is also woefully understaffed. To help overcome our violent nature, we must first learn about our own mind and brain. If a single day goes by without you learning something new, then that is a day wasted. The Scriptures teach nothing new. We need to triple the number of scientists and physicists that we now have. We need to teach our children about science, and from an early age. Yes, I've also somewhat exaggerated the chance of Earth getting hit full force soon, and I have greatly oversimplified the description of a CME. However, you do have a far better chance of dying at the hands of Mother Nature than by the wrath of some make-believe God. Students, if you want to save the world, study physics, science, and medicine, not the Bible. Go to college. Don't drop out. Get an advanced degree. Get paid a lot of money.
Well, that is assuming that the economy doesn't go downhill while you're in college.
Yes, we certainly hope it doesn't. But if everything does go right, don't forget, the more intelligent you are, the more that you learn, usually the more that you make. Now, kids, you kids that are watching, just like you have invisible make-believe friends that play with you, and how your teddy bear loves you and keeps you warm at night, God and Jesus are your mum and dad's invisible friends. God and Jesus are just make-believe. But shh, don't tell them that. It's our secret. Okay? You may ask, if we recently experienced a CME larger than our Earth, why are we not back in the Stone Age right now? Well, we almost were. It just missed us for the time period, but for the time period of 1 week in Earth's rotational orbit around the sun. If the CME had occurred just 1 week earlier, Earth would have suffered a direct catastrophic hit. It'll explain that in the video if you want to look it up on NASA. Yes, I hear the devout Christians now, and I also heard it on the 700 Club. Yeah, I was watching the 700 Club, because, I want differing opinions here. And I hear devout Christians saying, God saved us from that CME. Yeah, he saved us just so as he could destroy us all a little bit later. Some God, huh? Forget about donating your hard-earned wages to churches. Support schools, teachers, the science and education, not clergy. Forget about attending church on a Sunday. Visit a museum. Write a letter. Ask your congressman to allot more money to science, space, and medical research, to schools and colleges. Make churches pay taxes and file income tax returns and use the money to find a cure for cancer and provide scholarships for the technically gifted. Science belongs in schools, not prayer. So get off your back, get off your butt. Even if you are on the right track, if you just sit there, the train will run you over. You will live a lot longer with science as your companion than by just sitting on your butt, having faith, and waiting for the dynamic duo to save you. Before he destroys nearly everyone else, except you, like that. Apart from that, hey, have a worry-free day.
Oh.
Did I go a little bit overboard? Yeah. Well.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson once did a little speech saying we basically live in a cosmic shooting gallery.
Yes.
With asteroids passing by all the time. I seem to remember in the 90s, it seems like every time we were looking up at the sky, there was another comet passing through.
Yeah.
There just seemed to be like a couple years stretch there. It was like every year there was another comet.
And they were saying that, it doesn't look like it will hit us. I didn't say they definitely won't hit us. It doesn't look like it's going to hit us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, like the real danger with comets is that they don't actually have that much of a devastating impact. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they look, when they hit the Earth, they look exactly like an atomic bomb. Like there's actually a white flash, a mushroom cloud.
Then I won't worry. Okay.
What's that?
I said, then I won't worry. If it's only an atomic bomb.
Well, I'm just like, well, there was one that hit Russia not too long ago, and there were actually some people worried that America just nuked them because it looked, like I was saying, it looks exactly. If there would have been a comet hitting Russia during the Cold War, it might have actually sparked something.
Oh yeah. If you think of it that way, most definitely.
Unless they go out to the site with a Geiger counter to check for radiation, they're not going to know the difference. Mm-hmm. Because the two literally do look exactly alike.
Yeah, I imagine they'd even sort of have like a mushroom cloud as well.
Yeah, and the bright flash, and it leaves a shock wave that like throws everything down in a radial pattern. Yeah,
well, that wasn't it. Was it 1911 in Russia?
No, that was
an asteroid. No,
it was in a different place. The 1911 incident was somewhere else. It was actually only within the last decade that it hit in Russia.
Mm-hmm. There were a lot of TV coverage in that because Russians have cameras in their TVs very commonly because faked car accidents are a big problem in Russia. People pretend that you hit their car, so lots of people have little cameras mounted in their cars so that they can prove that they didn't hit you or you didn't hit them, that sort of thing. So there were lots of pictures of this meteor hitting, or comet hitting, and it was very impressive. You're right, there was a big white flash, and it
Yes,
was,
I
if you'd just
remember
been
seeing them,
standing there
yeah.
and seeing that, you would wonder if somebody had just lobbed a bomb in your direction.
But what I was talking about, maybe 1911 wasn't it, but it was in Russia. It took them, because it was so remote, it actually took them 3 or 4 years to reach the location, and all the trees had been laid out in a circle like, almost like a crop circle.
Sure
And
that wasn't aliens?
It could have been. I haven't think that there are aliens running our control board out there, but just kidding. That's too old. Jim Rumpelstiltskin, our technical god back there. So thank you, Jim, for doing what you do. So anyway, I think I skipped over what we were supposed to do, and that's the incoming events. Would you like to just run down what's coming up?
Okay. Sure. I'll take care of that now. The biggest thing on our calendar is this weekend is the Atheist and Humanist Conference in Pittsburgh. There are still tickets available. If you're still on the fence about going, it should be a great time. There's lots of good speakers, and you can find out more info at atheistpa.org. And our next table event is not until September 21st, and it will be at Gettysburg Recreation Park. And then there will be the Fall Crafts Festival in Cumberland Street in Lebanon on the 27th. So a little bit more quiet tabling this month, but our summer table season is starting to wind down here. Our next meetup in Lancaster is on August 27th, later this week. York is on September 6th. Lebanon is on the 10th. Harrisburg is on the 11th. Chambersburg on the 16th. And our second Perry County meeting will be on the 18th. And our next show will be on September 9th. And I'll be talking a little bit about maybe a little bit of review of the conference. And I'll also be starting a mini-series on philosophy.
Very good. Is Pumpkin Fest on there? Are we going to be doing that this year?
It's not till October.
Yeah, I was just sort of jumping the gun there because we really like
I think
Oktoberfest.
I think it'll be on October 11th, if I remember correctly. But we'll be talking about more of that as we get closer.
Yeah.
So,
Now,
I think we're talk to.
let's introduce Pam Zerba, who will be reviewing and promoting the book of which Pam wrote a chapter, Atheists in America. Take it.
Thank you. The book came about 2 years ago. I received an email along with everybody else in PAN asking if we wanted to write an essay for an upcoming book talking about our experience as atheists in the United States. And I submitted something. Apparently this email went to all sorts of atheist organizations and groups all over the country and to various colleges, any place where somebody could pass it along. So I submitted my essay and didn't think much more about it. I assumed that this was going to be in somebody's graduate thesis. I didn't really think it was going to be a book. Well, about 6 months after that, I got my essay back from Melanie Brewster, the woman who was the editor, and she had really edited it. She had crossed stuff out and added things in and said, could you expand that? Could you take that out? So I thought, well, goodness, this is really going to be a book. And sure enough, it really is a book. It has been published by the Columbia University Press. It can be purchased through Amazon. And remember, if you want to buy through Amazon, you need to go to Pennsylvania Nonbelievers website and click on the Amazon button there. If you do that, Pennsylvania Nonbelievers gets a cut of anything you purchase on Amazon. So it's a really easy, simple, good thing to do.
And it doesn't cost you any extra.
No, it does not cost you any extra. It does not take any more time. It's just the simplest thing in the world to do. I just did it yesterday. Very simple. Also want to say that neither I nor Pennsylvania Nonbelievers gets any money from the book I'm talking about right here. This is purely goes to Columbia University. The book itself has 27 chapters that deal with what it's like to be an atheist in America, hence the title. There are several categories. It's leaving faith, cultural contexts, 2 closets, that's for people who are gay and who are also atheists, romantic relationships, family life, parenting, the search for connection, atheism at work, and atheism and aging. My particular section fell under the search for connection, which at first I thought was sort of odd because I thought maybe atheist at work would be more appropriate for it, but I think really she's right because as I read all the other chapters, one thing I notice is that almost nobody has a group like Pan. A lot of people talk about how hard it is to find somebody who is also an atheist, to find a group of people they can talk to and be comfortable talking with. So I think sometimes we don't appreciate how lucky we are to have Pan, to have an outlet, a place where we can feel comfortable. That's one of the things I talk about.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Like when I really first started coming to terms with my own atheism and wanted to get involved, it was only just a quick Google search to find this place.
And it's like I said, I think we take it for granted. I think people don't, a lot of places, they don't have that. In fact, in my essay, I mentioned a couple of times actually appearing on this very show. One time was a very memorable moment when I was on and we had a caller call in and he said, you know, I don't know why you want to be on television talking about atheism. You know, there are people who like to drown puppies, but they don't come on TV. It's like, oh, that's great. Atheism is like drowning puppies. Thank you so much, sir. And the second time that I mentioned in my essay is when I was at work. I was doing a project in a different department where nobody knew me. I was pretty much out at work. People knew that I certainly wasn't a believer. Some people knew I was an atheist. But somebody saw me on the show. And the next day said, why were you on that show? So we talked about it a little bit. And finally, after a couple of minutes, some of the women I was working with at that point didn't even know what an atheist was. I had to explain to them what it meant to be an atheist. But finally, at the end, one of them said, well, so this is like a civil rights issue that atheists get accepted. And I said, yes, it is. And they said, okay, then. And we were fine after that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think one of the things, too, reading some of these essays and talking to the people who wrote them, because I live in a pretty atheist-friendly world with friends and people who know me, I forget how many people really don't like atheists, you know, and how the big A word is just like, you know, like a cross to Dracula. You know, it's just the thing that just really freezes people. And
Right, and part of that is, I've mentioned this a few times, there's a lot of misinformation spread, and especially directly from the pulpit that I grew up around too. That's why a lot of times it's hard for people to admit they're an atheist because they're like, well, I'm not that,
Right.
so
I'm not a bad person, therefore.
yeah.
One of the things I say in my essay, and I feel very strongly about, is that that's not all our fault by any means, because if people accepted atheism as just a normal stop on philosophy, you know, from, you know, evangelical here, atheist there, then atheists wouldn't have to sometimes be as aggressive as we are to get our point across. But the fact is, if you say you're an atheist, people are going to be very hostile. Pretty loudmouth people are the ones who are going to be the ones who speak up. You know, the quiet and shy, bookish types aren't going to keep it to themselves. One other thing about this book, right after we had a book party in New York for it, which was loads of fun. It was at the Society for Ethical Culture, which is on West 64th Street, a block from Central Park. It was very cool. We had a very good time. We did readings. There were about 80 people there.
Do you mean cold, cool, or cool, cool?
Cool.
Cool. Okay.
It was actually a very hot day, so it was cool. But one of the people who'd written an essay called me a couple of days before we were supposed to go to New York because she grew up in Mechanicsburg. So she just wanted to talk about Pennsylvania and isn't it a small world. And she's talking to me and she gave me her name and I thought, boy, I don't remember her essay. Gosh, I better reread these to make sure when I meet people I can actually talk about them. Or it turned out in a book about atheism in America, in a book that talks about coming out, this woman did not use her real name. And there's at least one other person who just uses their first name. So even in a book like this, and it's not like this is going to be a bestseller and everybody in America is going to be reading it, they aren't comfortable enough to use their own name, which to me is very sad and just absolutely amazing.
There's too many nutcases out there that don't reason, and you become a mortal enemy.
I actually saw a video recently where they talked about some of the backlash that's been faced, like some of the more extreme cases. And they admit, okay, these are a little bit more extreme. But there was literally one time where someone was, I think, protesting something they were doing in the school. And after they left their house one day, somebody threw a firebomb in it. And after, like, they completely lost their house. And the next week, the school filed a petition saying that they no longer lived in the district, so that they no longer had standing. I mean, that's about as extreme as it gets. But
There's a story from Alabama. A county in Alabama wanted to put "In God We Trust" on the wall at the county office building, and they had a meeting about it. And a couple of people spoke and said, "Why don't we put In Reason We Trust?" And of course, that didn't go anywhere.
Yes.
But one of the women posted what was on her Facebook page after she did this, and it's just incredible, along the general lines of "Why don't we lynch people anymore?" And the thing is, all right, the guy who wrote that is probably not coming to our house with a rope, but there are a lot of crazy people out there.
Right.
And if you have those kind of thoughts out there, you just don't know who's gonna like get imbalanced or get drunk and decide this is a good idea. It is just amazing to me how angry we make people. My husband and I, George, we go to an interfaith group, and we've been going there for a while. And one of the guys, after we'd been going for several months, very nice man, said to me that he was embarrassed by the way he used to think about atheists before he met us. And it just amazed me. This means he never met an open atheist before, I would think. And that's kind of amazing in the first place. But it also, I wanted to say, what did you think? Just because I was kind of curious, but he didn't want to go into it. But it is just, I guess I'm just surrounded by so many people who aren't religious nor atheists. I lose track of how angry our very presence makes people.
Right. And I think part of that can come from the fact that there's no way to say you're an atheist without implicitly telling them that they're wrong.
Yes.
That's
exactly.
one thing that I've heard brought up a few times.
That's true. If you're a Presbyterian and you go to a Methodist and you say to them, I'm a Presbyterian, you're not throwing everything they believe out the window.
Well, at least you believe in God.
That's right. Even if you're a Muslim or even if you're Jewish, you at least have something going all the way back up to the top.
Some
that you agree
commonality
with.
there.
Right.
And yeah, that is a big part of it. And it's sometimes telling them, oh, actually, the person you think is in heaven really isn't doing anything. You know, there's all kinds of baggage that comes with it.
Well, I think sometimes too, because some of the things we say they really don't have a good answer for.
Right.
Like when they say they're praying for someone who's sick, you can say back, well, wait a minute, I thought God had planned this all out, so how can you be praying to the person who planned this all out, who knew you were going to pray? Right. I mean, that's the point. And was anybody else aggravated by the doctor who was cured by Ebola? I mean, I'm glad the man was cured, and I'm sure he does enormously good work in Africa. But when he started talking about how it was a miracle that God cured him, and how wonderful God was for doing that, well, I guess all those poor people in Africa who died, the thousands who have died, I guess they just didn't pray right, or maybe they didn't pray to the right God.
And
What did they do to make God
there was
angry?
There was an African faith healer that caused part of that outbreak.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They were not necessarily a Christian faith healer, but there was like
He helped spread it.
Yeah, there was some. There were a few people trying to essentially not take the proper precautions around it, and by resorting to some superstitious healing method, and that actually spread it a bit more. I don't mean to say it caused the entire outbreak, but, it kind of fueled the fire a little bit when they were just this irrational belief in faith healing. But I know what you mean. But I have to say, I've read through quite a bit of this book, quite a few of the essays, and one thing I find really fascinating about it is just reading into perspectives of people who've gone through things that I haven't, like different religions. I think there's a couple of people from talking about Islam, and I was kind of shocked at seeing the things that even happened in America in Islam. I knew some of that stuff was going on overseas, but I didn't realize it was still going on here, such as arranged marriages. Those still very much go on in America itself.
Well, actually, at the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Harrisburg, we went there as part. They invited people from Pan to go up a couple of years ago, and we went up there. And of course, the women had to be separated from the men.
Right.
And the women talked to us, and the women, Ahmadiyya Muslims are very well educated. The women we talked to, many of them were medical doctors. They were professional people, but they had arranged marriages, and the ones who had children, it was their hobby. It was their part-time job to get husbands and wives for their kids, because there aren't a lot of Ahmadiyya Muslims, period, and there aren't a lot of Ahmadiyya Muslims in the United States. So they had a couple of times a year, they have meetings in various parts of the country so the kids can all meet. Like sometimes they'll be in Ohio. I think there was one in Annapolis they were telling us about. And to them, that just didn't seem, and the idea that we would just leave this to random chance, let our foolish children run out there and try and marry somebody on their own, just strikes them as insane. And the thing is, I would shake my head, except one of the women we talked to was, again, a medical student in her mid-20s, charming, intelligent.
Right.
And
it has nothing to do with education.
No, it doesn't. And it just, to us, it was just sort of stunning, and to them, it's just sort of stunning that everybody doesn't do it. Yeah, but it is interesting how those customs.
Yeah.
And of course, if you don't want to marry the person they picked for you, or heaven forbid, you don't want to marry an Ahmadiyya Muslim, to say somebody who isn't a Muslim at all, that's big trouble. That's
nothing good's going to
big
happen
problem.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good at all.
And I kind of also found the essay written by the Mormon.
Yes.
It was a bit amusing. Some things you don't think about, like here, you don't think about much about people sitting in a coffee shop. But in Utah, that might actually be a gathering of atheists.
That's right.
Just because Mormons aren't allowed to drink any caffeine. So you see a bunch of people in a coffee shop, they're all, you at least know they're non-Mormons.
Yeah.
And it's...
She came to the reading in New York, and she was great. She was very funny.
Yeah.
And she was, one of the things she said is that alcohol didn't do anything much for her, but coffee, she was now a big fan of coffee, having left the Muslim church.
Yeah, it's just like little things you just do not think about, and I think it's really a lot of the purpose of this book is to really, I think it's not only beneficial for non-atheists to read this to get the idea of what atheists are about, how we are, but I think it's
how we think.
I think it's also very beneficial for atheists to read this. Just because it will give you, as I said before, more perspective on whether the people have gone through.
Mm-hmm. I think so, and it makes it, at least somebody like me, more sympathetic to people who absolutely will not reveal their secret identity as an atheist. I get a little impatient with that sometimes. I think people are more than a little paranoid, at least sometimes, that the world isn't going to come crashing down on your head. But there are people for whom the world has come crashing down on their head.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say. My family didn't disown me, and I didn't have workplace repercussions.
Right.
So I should maybe be a little more tolerant of that sort of thing.
Let me tell you, I won't mention the supermarket, but there's one particular supermarket that I frequent a lot, and almost every day, because they have the, it's like a Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi there. And I used to go in there, and there was this gentleman always used to walk around, an employee, and he was always very friendly, hi, and I congratulated him on putting up the Christmas lights, and he did a great job, and it's all smiles. And then one day, I said hello to him, and he just kind of gave me a dirty look and walked by. And maybe he's having a bad day. And this happened a few times. And I asked one of the girls at the counter that knew him, I said, what's wrong with this gentleman? I says, he used to be friendly all the time. I said, did I say something to offend him? And she goes, well, kind of. And I go, what do you mean? He says, he saw your TV show. And he has never smiled at me. He's never looked at me since.
I guess if he's nice to you, it might be catching.
Yeah.
It might catch your atheist cooties.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things you said interesting in your essay was you were at this point where you were willing to question everything except for God itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I left the Catholic Church long before I admitted out loud that I was an atheist. That's for
Right.
sure.
I remember Thomas Paine commented on the Age of Reason that he said something like, "Deism was our first religion and will probably be our last."
Well, we can only hope. And, it does seem, the tide seems to be going in our direction, at least in terms of religion. I'm not sure about in belief of God. I'm not sure that that's changing dramatically. But in terms of the people who are going to church,
Right.
that does seem to be, and in fact, we, at our interfaith meeting, we asked some of there are some ministers there, and we asked them, why do you think people aren't going to church anymore? And they didn't really have a great answer. What they'll say is that the mega churches are drawing people in like crazy, but that your old-fashioned, Presbyterian, Methodist, kind of church, it really isn't. People aren't showing up in the pews very much anymore. And I think that is where we're coming down, where you're going to have people who don't go at all, or people who go to the mega churches that have a lot of entertainment. A lot of music, a lot of lights, a lot of film strips, color, music.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about too, because I know the church I grew up in was very strict, but there was a lot of hypocrisy in that church. And it really came to a head at one point. Just apparently, it started to blow up just as I left, and apparently they went from about 500 members to 50 in a couple of years. And I think they got a new pastor in and kind of cleaned house. And now I start seeing flyers for the church, for events at the church. I'm shaking my head, going, they would have never dreamed of doing that 10 years when I was going there.
Oh, okay.
And it's even who was that who said something like, everything I learned about advertising I learned at church. Where it's that's what that seems to be the main thing now, is they're definitely, there's definitely a shift. Like, I know Seth Andrews did a speech like that where he was showing all these youth ministry stuff, and he goes, anyone else in here just shake their head and go, we never had anything like this, where they would have just well-produced sets in the church, and it was really a lot more commercialism than there used to be.
It's interesting about that too. People talk about Pope Francis and what a great guy he is. Well, as a matter of fact, Pope Francis has a public relations firm that helps him make his statements, because when he doesn't have the public relations statements, he's not as warm and charming as he is when they kind of go through channels. So it again is marketing, which they're a big business. Why wouldn't they have marketing? But it's just sort of funny to think that the Pope needs a public relations guy.
Yeah.
You would think God would tell him what to say.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey,
Well, one more thing though. In addition to the print version, this is also available in Kindle. If you have an e-reader, which I do, and I love
so
it.
if you have any Kindleites out there, do the same thing. Go to Pennsylvania Nonbelievers and then click on the site for Amazon, and you can get it through them. We like letters to the editor, especially some of them that like to slam us or to slam America because it's lost its Christian values and everything, and everything. And, you know, we strongly support the separation of church and state. But let me read this letter to the editor. The First Amendment to the Constitution begins, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. The Supreme Court justices have made a point of reassuring us that we needn't worry that they will allow more exceptions to the Affordable Care Act for religious reasons. Jehovah's Witnesses won't be allowed to exclude payments for blood transfusions. Scientologists won't be allowed to exclude mental health benefits. Christian Scientists won't be allowed to exclude payments for medical care altogether. Why not? Why aren't the sincerely held beliefs of these religious equals to those of Catholics and other conservative religionists who disapprove of some or more forms of birth control? Why does the Supreme Court think it has the authority to choose which religion beliefs to honor and which to ignore? Isn't this a de facto establishment of religion? This should give us all pause, even those who rejoice in the Hobby Lobby decision. After all, maybe next time it won't be a religion that the Supreme Court decides to favor. And it was by some person named Pam Zerba.
Do you know?
Oh, yes.
Funny thing about that, the comments afterward, almost all of them said, you just want to have abortion. You just want to have abortion. You just want free contraception. And it's like, no, that's not the point.
Yeah.
That's one thing. If you want to oppose a law for whatever reason, even if I disagree with it, if you can come up with a secular reason, okay, we can discuss that. But when it's just in religious reasons, it's like, well, then you open up the floodgate. Well, except the fact that the Supreme Court is pretty much owned by the Catholic Church right now.
Yeah. Which is just amazing when you think of the history of the Supreme Court. But,
Yeah. And I think letters to the editor can be important like that sometimes, because I think you can reach people who normally wouldn't pay attention to us at all.
That's right. These are not people who are reading the Freedom from Religion Foundation newsletter. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's one thing. When I first got in the movement, I looked at all these bloggers who would write small books for blogs. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can do that, but I can write short letters to the editor, and that can actually make every bit the difference. Showing people.
Well, and sometimes shorter is better, just because people's attention span.
Right.
Yeah. Let me quickly read part of one other letter to the editor here. We're running a little short on time, so I'll keep it short, because this Gerald Cornbow, he wrote a long letter here, and he titles it, "We deserve God's coming judgment." Judgment is coming upon America. The first reason is because we have kicked God out of our schools and society. In the early years of educating children, the truths and moral values of the Bible were commonly taught. It wasn't until 1961 that prayer and the Bible reading were removed from our public schools. I still remember when I was in elementary school when the teacher read from the Bible. Another thing he says here, the third reason for judgment is because we have desecrated God's plan for marriage. In God's words, it is clearly that homosexuality is an abomination, like that. Many
Does
would,
it say anything in there about shrimp being an abomination too,
yeah, right.
Well, and the other thing that got me when I was
or tattoos?
raised Catholic is that, I do believe it says what God has joined together,
Let no man
should
put asunder.
But Protestants didn't care about that. Protestants got divorced. I mean,
Yeah.
so how come they didn't have to follow that part?
Right.
It's all cherry picking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is, and he says, I don't believe that we will take God's warning seriously, and therefore we will be judged. Well, okay, judge away. Right.
So, yeah, they'll take anything that bad that happens in the country as confirmation that we're being judged. But my question is, when have we been really truly a utopia in this country?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
If God didn't care when we had slavery, and apparently he didn't.
Man.
No, in fact, God encourages slavery. The only thing that God didn't want, he didn't want Jews to be slaves, but the rest.
Well, actually, no. They could be slaves. They would just be released eventually.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, there's all kinds of other things. You could go into how complicated slavery was there, but I think they could be released eventually, unless you got them a wife or some weird rule like that.
But I mean, this guy took.
I was reading something today about that. That if your slave if you married your slave, then you had to treat her like a wife. But if you didn't marry, I mean, it just went on and on and on.
Right. It's really convoluted. But you look at the American history not through this idealized lens, but for the down and dirty what it really was. You'll see that what we're going through now is nothing really to sweat. We've probably gone through it several times. I don't want to go back to the good old days when our children worked in dirty coal mines and factories.
When life expectancy was 48.
Right, 48. There wasn't much of an education system. Vaccines hadn't been developed yet. So any old disease could wipe out half the population.
Yeah.
Speaking of modern improvements, I just realized, I didn't know this. You can follow Pennsylvania Nonbelievers on Twitter. I did not know that, at PA Nonbelievers. So those of you who Twitter or whatever it is, tweet.
Those of you that are twits.
Them too.
We are also available on Facebook as well, and also we have a YouTube channel which we post these broadcasts later on. I will try to get this up in the next 24 to 48 hours, if my internet doesn't go down again. Yes, I live in Perry County. We get joked about a lot, and half of them are deserved. We got called scumbags by May Linda Thompson.
But it's so pretty. See, that's your revenge. It's such a beautiful place.
Right. Which should be fun when we have our first table there in October.
Oh, that's right. Now, October. What is the date of that again? October.
I think it's the 5th. It's the first Saturday in October.
Okay.
Very good.
Which,
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. That'll be. You can introduce this to all your Mormon-friendly Christian neighbors.
Mormon? I don't think so.
You don't have any Mormon-friendly Christian neighbors?
Probably not. No. Well, actually, no. There is actually a Mormon church nearby. I haven't talked to them much. Although the western end of the county has a lot of Amish.
I always make it a point that if I'm meeting someone for the first time, I never come right out and say that I am an atheist. I wait until I get to know them and they know me like that, and then maybe I will casually drop it, just so as their first impression of me is not clouded by the word atheists. So,
Well, I think that's often a good idea, although it would be nice if we could drop it in the conversation as easily as, say, Baptists or Mormons or Catholics or...
Yeah, and talk about how you prayed to Jesus just out of a clear blue sky. So I guess our time is kind of winding down now. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you for having me on here.
It's always a pleasure, Pam. As you have people that have watched the show over the years, You've seen Pam here over the years, but she was taking a short sabbatical here, and this book was the ideal excuse to get her back. So we thank you very much.